Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. I'm joined by my buddy Zach, and we're just gonna talk about some things music related and shoot the shit a little bit. Zach, first of all, I've been meaning to ask you, how did the banjo call to you?
Oh man. So back in high school, I got into kind of the punk rock kid scene. And I really wasn't into punk rock. I was just like the people. And for some
Okay,
reason, somebody told me that I should learn an instrument. And I said the only two instruments or three instruments I'm interested in learning is piano, violin, and the banjo. And still didn't learn any instrument for a long time. I mean, wasn't until I was like 22 that I bought an instrument. So
okay.
when I actually got the banjo, what caused me to buy a banjo was actually trying to impress a chick.
Oh, a
And
tale
I
as
can
old as time.
guarantee it was not very impressive to chicks at all.
Shoot. Well, maybe you
Yeah.
should have
So,
went. Was she like Southern? Maybe a Southern girl would
well,
find that
no,
impressive.
she was actually from California. And for some
Ah,
reason, I was drunk and I told her that I was learning the banjo. So I went home that night and bought a banjo.
because you weren't really looking.
Because I wasn't
Yeah.
actually, I was lying my ass off. So I had to correct that lie. And then I held on to the banjo for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years before I ever even took lessons or even tried.
Oh, really?
So yeah, it was just collecting dust in my room for a long time because it turns out that the banjo is not an instrument that most girls actually really care about.
Man, that's funny. Yeah, if she was from Cali, you should have been said you were a DJ or something. That might have been
Yeah,
more.
well, it just stuck in my brain. And then I kind of, ever since then, I've loved I mean, I already liked banjos for the most part. They were a fun instrument to listen to because they're just kind of a peppy sound. You
Yeah,
can't really go wrong with banjo. It's always happy. Even
that's
when you're
true.
singing really, really, really like sad, decrepit songs, they just come out happy with a banjo.
Yeah, it just must be the timbre of it. Um, they're interesting instruments. Anytime I hear them, it's like I don't know. I mean, and how you play it, it's a lot of time you're just finger picking it, right? And so it just has that like I can't think of the word right now, but
Kind of
like a
different
giddy
cadence.
up kind of do do do
Yeah.
do do do, kind of. But I mean, you basically put a stringed instrument together with like a percussive instrument, and thus the banjo's alive, right? Because you basically have like a little drum head at the bottom of it.
Yeah, it's a snare drum.
Yeah, so kind of an interesting concept, but kind of cool. I I know a couple people that I studied music with that play the banjo and like a um, bluegrass band,
Mhm.
and yeah, it's interesting stuff. I I've played the banjo like once or twice. And I found it interesting, but like guitar's my thing. It just speaks to me in a different level. It's just like you can shred on the banjo in a different way than you can shred on like a guitar, because of how things are, first of all, how it sounds, but then also like the neck and how it's tuned. So for me, it was just like, oh, I gotta play the guitar. I mean, I would own a banjo if I had a bigger space. I'd just have like all the string instruments in my wall at some point. Um, I will say though, the one instrument that I do want to get, but it doesn't make sense to have right now. I got to put my money in other places. Is a Renaissance lute.
What's the difference between a Renaissance flute and a standard flute? Like one of those
Lute,
uh,
lute.
lute. Oh,
Yeah, it's like a pear-shaped instrument that they used to play in the Renaissance ages. Like you would have some kind of musician play for the king and the gesture as he like performed, and it's like I don't know how I can. It's hard to
I know what a lute
explain this.
is.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then the neck is like bowed
Okay. Yeah.
or bent backwards, and I mean the neck is only like it's not super long, But it sounds so cool. It's just, it's kind of like it's got that like old history to it, like kind of like a harpsichord, a harpsichord has a really cool sound that in the right setting sounds really cool, but the lute's the same thing, the Renaissance lute. So there's different versions of it, but they they've always been like interesting to me. So I'm like, gotta get one at some point. But yeah, that's so funny about your story though about learn how you got into the band. I had no
Yeah,
idea that it was quite
that was
that.
it. I told a lie at a bar and had to own it.
Man, I wonder how many people learned an instrument for something like that. We'll take a poll after this, everyone.
I would say there's probably quite a bit. Leave a comment or something, right?
Right, right. Oh man, how many comedians got into doing that? Or, I mean, when I was growing up, it was the guitar, right? You gotta learn the guitar to get the girls, right? And
No, that's the same with my generation. It was guitar or bass to get the girls or something, or drums. But I just, for some reason, stuck with my three instruments that I wanted to learn, and banjo happened to be the cheapest. I couldn't afford a piano, so.
that's funny. Well, no, not funny that you couldn't afford it, but like just funny that just that story.
But yeah,
All right,
and two hundred
well,
dollars.
learn from Zach. If you're gonna pick an instrument to tell a girl that you know how to play, but you really don't know how to play it, pick an instrument that you like, because then you'll learn it afterwards if it doesn't work out with the girl, right? Even
Yeah,
if it's 5 or
I've been
6 years later.
obsessed ever since. I love it.
Everything works out. Everything happens for a reason, I believe, even if it sucks. There's some lesson to be learned or some skill to be acquired.
It's kind of like the
That's
story of Job in the Bible, where Satan bets with God, and Satan puts him through so much crap, yet he never loses his faith. But I feel like that's kind of a lesson of life, too. The better a person is, seems to be put through hell and back, where more evil people seem to get away with things. It's not necessarily, it's like testing your faith.
yeah. No, exactly. And I think even for people that aren't religious, like I think, if you believe in just like destiny or the will of the universe, if you will, um, everything happens for a reason. Even like, our loved ones passing away, like that's just, how life is. We only live so long, but maybe in losing that loved one, you realized how important certain things are to you. I have a family member that has, lost someone that was close to them, and their perspective on a lot of things have changed, right? And they realized, how much they love family and the hardships that they go through, and just kind of, everything involved with that. And then you have to go through grief. Once you learn how to go through grief, that teaches you a lot of things too, like how you interact with day-to-day people, even if they aren't going to become like loved ones of yours, but like it could just be a random Joe walking down the street and you're like, you know what? I have no idea what's going on in this person's life. I have no idea what they're dealing with. I have no idea if they just lost their job, if they're going through a divorce, or if they're like homeless, or, 1,000 different things. And it kind of changes your interactions with day to day people, at least, you know, in my experience of losing, people close to me. I lost my grandmother not that long ago, and, I've lost other friends and other family members as well. It just changes your perspective, if not indefinitely, at least for a time. Um, for me, I feel like it like right after it happens, it definitely affects me for a while. And then I still have those lessons I keep with me. It's just not as fresh.
Yeah, I agree.
So, well, so what are you doing with the banjo right now? You working on a bluegrass album?
Uh, actually, I'm trying to get, I'm working on timing, which I have decent enough timing I can play with people, but I'm playing extremely slow, like 50 BPM to a metronome, so
Okay.
that I can break down the licks, because I've learned how to play with just muscle memory and licks. It's like and
Yeah.
you'll throw that into a song here and there. But to have the fundamentals of when it actually hits on the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4 in the count, I'm clueless. So to slow it down and focus on actually counting and understanding the licks is what I've been doing lately.
Gotcha. Okay. No, that's a good practice to do. I cannot tell you how many times being in a practice room of just working on like tempo and things like that. I don't do it quite as much now, but I still do. It's actually harder to play slow than it is quick. People like, for the most part, like slowing things down as a musician, you're like, whoa. You really have to be really good with timing because you have to be even more like on the dot. When it's faster, you can, you kind of just get into that, like you said, muscle memory mode. As long as your fingers can move that fast, um, you usually can lock in. Um, it's easier to lock in generally, but when it's slow, like that's something that in bands and ensembles in college, our professors would have us do is play a song really slow to lock in the groove. And for some people, it would be a lot harder because you would think it'd be easier because it's like, oh, well, I have all this time to get to the next note or whatever. No, it's not. It's actually pretty hard. So,
Yeah, it also kind of disjoints the melody in your head, so you're hearing more of individual notes than the whole run, and
yep,
causes a little bit of confusion that way. Because just like if you were to play "Mary Had a Little Lamb," but spread it out over 7 minutes, you wouldn't hear "Mary Had a Little Lamb" anymore. You would hear "dun dun" type of thing. It wouldn't even make
yeah,
sense. And that's what's been hard for me, because the licks aren't making sense in my brain when I slow them down to that extreme.
yeah. That's a good point. We basically disassociate it anymore from the song. The melody's not there, and the groove is so slow that it's unrecognizable as well. So it's like, yeah, a great practice. So no, that's good that you're doing that because that honestly is a good skill to have.
It's definitely
So,
helped.
oh, go ahead.
I was saying it helped me because I've been doing it for about 3 weeks now. And about a week ago, I went to a camp out with a bunch of guys. Somebody busted out a guitar. I busted out the banjo. And just knowing the chord progression and kind of how my timing of that 1, 2, 3, 4 worked into the song, I was able to accurately change chords with the guy, which
Nice.
I've never really been able to do before. So it's been great practice.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, playing with people live, especially people you haven't played with before, or just kind of on the spot, and not like mentally preparing, you just jump into it, into the fire, if you will. It's like some of the best practice because then you realize where you're at, what you need to work on, and it's great practice. So, are you going to do that this evening when because aren't you going camping this evening?
I'm going up to Deer Creek at about 2 o'clock.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So you're going to be doing more water stuff than like camping stuff.
It's more like a barbecue with people I know out in Heber.
Oh, okay. Well,
Think
you
I'll be at
could
the water.
potentially bring the banjo then, depending on what you want to do and if you feel like it's the right crowd.
I generally bring a banjo with me everywhere I go anymore. It's actually kind of become my thing.
Nice. Hey, you
I
might
actually
as well. I mean,
just one
so
that I can throw in my car.
yeah, man. Hopefully it hasn't. You've been doing that all summer?
Well, I've been doing it for the last 5 years, really.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Hopefully you got a good case for it in this
No,
Utah
I just buy a
heat.
really, really cheap banjo off of KSL.
Oh, okay. It's your
Like,
traveling
yeah.
banjo. The traveling banjo. It's okay. I've when I was playing with my 80s band for a while, there would be at least one guitar that would sit in a car probably too much. And I'm sure other guitarists are gonna be like, "What? What?" And it definitely, wasn't good for it. But it was like my backup guitar, and so I just, it was one that I wanted to have on hand. And a lot of times we just had a bunch of sound gear and guitars and like a Suburban between gigs and stuff, especially for this quick turnaround. We're about to travel again, which I don't recommend anyone do. It's terrible for your devices and instruments, but just get a cheap one, and then you have one always on hand. I I I always have a lot of things in my car, honestly, nowadays. I have fishing gear. I have cornhole. I have a set of cornhole that I pretty much always keep, especially in the summer to fall, because you never know when you're gonna meet up with some people and they're, it's just like a fun thing to pull out and people can play cornhole. My set is super sandy though. It's been on a lot of beaches, and it's like my summer beach set. And so anytime I pull it out, I'm like, okay, guys, we can only use this outside because the bean bags are so dirty that every time they hit the ground, there's be a poof of sand and dirt. But it's fun. I probably a couple ounces of weight added from that, but that's okay, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, I have too much stuff in my car. I need to actually go through it and clean it. But I go fishing so much right now. I went fishing last night, and then I usually I have like a bucket full of gear, like my net and some lights and gloves and just some stuff. And then I have my tackle box, and then I have my rods. I usually keep my rods um in my apartment though, unless I'm about to go fishing that day. And luckily, where I work, it's in a big garage, covered garage, so like the sun's not gonna like do anything to it. But when I'm at home, I don't have a garage, and so I try not to keep the rods in there just so they don't get damaged or the line gets sun rot or whatever. So it's a problem though. I do need to clean some stuff out. All
Keep
right.
fishing line and a couple of hooks in my car just for survivalist things. Because if you ever go out in the woods and you really want to just up it, you can always have a fishing hook and a line. You don't even need a rod to actually fish. Just drop the line.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it is a good survival thing to have on you. Because like I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, okay, what if the world goes to hell and we go into World War III or whatever. I have some I have some survival stuff. I got a 72-hour kit. I have some other things that I won't say, but I I'm like, but what about fishing stuff? Because like that would be a good source of food, unless I guess if it was World War III and a nuke happened, I don't know how good it'd be to eat a fish, or any animal at that point. But yeah, better to have it than not though, because I mean, if you can't eat fish, you can't eat animals, and you probably couldn't eat the um, like
Well,
vegetables and things like that too,
if
depending
they
where the impact was.
well, any animal that's been exposed to that much radiation, if they're still alive after a month, they're probably okay to eat. The reason being is
Hmm.
because the levels of radiation that actually would kill you after ingesting a secondary source of radiation like that, because it's already been absorbed by one animal, you're the next animal in line, you're actually getting less dose of radiation. So after 1 month, if they're still alive, they're probably okay.
Good to know. Well, hopefully I never have to find that out the hard
But
way, but
hopefully nobody ever has to find that out the hard way. I mean,
it's true. That's the question too. Like, if something like that were to happen worldwide, would you want to survive? Like,
yeah,
that's the question. You would?
oh yeah. I'd like to see how our world rebuilds and what kind of history we make and be part of that.
All right, all right. Yeah, I just kind of wrestle with that question. I'm like, it might be okay just to not be one of the survivors that have to deal with that. But at the same time, I do like me and a couple of my brothers, like we lived out on a farm for a long time, and then we lived in Idaho where we just would play out and do survival things, right, and make fires and weapons out of sticks and shelters and stuff, and that was fun. And I'm like, yeah, it might be kind of interesting. I mean, it wouldn't be fun having to deal with the fallout and like how I don't know, depending how bad it was, how crazy people got. But it'd be interesting having to figure that out because it would be a good test of your skills. You know, if could you bring a community together? I feel like in the movies how crazy it gets. In some circumstances, it might be like that, but at the same time, I feel like more people would come together probably. Um, and, I mean, there would be tribes for sure. You'd break into tribes and little things like that. But I think people would actually look out for each other more I mean, I guess it depends how far you're looking out. Like in the movies, it's usually like years and years down the road, right? But when something initially happens, I feel like depending where you live, every state would be a little different for sure. People would come together. I feel like in Utah, people would come together for the most part. Small towns definitely would. Like people in Idaho or different
I
states
think
that were.
most of the mid Central America, not really the coasts, but Central America would be fine with community building because we already are.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, I would say maybe there's a couple locations where it would have issues with maybe like Salt Lake, like the big cities, right, in the state.
I really don't think so. I think that people, because even Salt Lake, the let's say the more woke crowd, still are not nearly as bad as Seattle's woke crowd type thing. Like they still have a bit of common sense to help each other out.
You would hope so. I mean, um, yeah, I guess we wouldn't really know until it happened, but like,
Another
yeah,
thing
I
that I
don't know.
think would happen, because I mean, obviously your infrastructure would be compromised, especially the internet would be compromised. Where they're getting their indoctrination would cease. They would have to come together to even have some kind of semblance of knowledge or news about what's going on. So it would force them to interact with the whole community, whether they like it or not.
Yeah, that's a good point. You wouldn't have this
You have
influence
your
from the. Yeah, you wouldn't have the influence from the media anymore. So it would be interesting how much like human nature would change because
I feel like we would just go back to around the 1900s era. I mean, take electricity out of America, and that's what you get. You get right around the turn of the century.
yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. We would have relics of technology and
Mm-hmm.
um,
But we wouldn't really use it fully unless we built things around it.
yeah, yeah. It would be interesting though because I feel like we're as a society we're less reliable on our own skills and we have less knowledge of like building things from the ground up. At least that general population, right? Not everyone knows how to shoot a gun. Not everyone knows how to build a farm. Not everyone knows how to do plumbing. Not everyone knows how to cook properly, right? Some people just survive on fast food their whole life. And
Even that, even that, just considering that, take a simple pencil. How much effort goes into building a pencil?
yep,
You have miners, you have farmers, you have woodworkers, you have factory builders. We have the steel that goes into the tools that build the graphite. And like, there's millions of people that come together just to build a pencil.
yeah, yeah. We'd be using charcoal, I think, charcoal or something, a quill again, something more simple, probably for a while. Yeah, that's a good point. There'd be a lot of things that society, puts a. It takes a lot of hands to make that we just wouldn't have for a long time. Toilet paper, for instance, we wouldn't have toilet paper, which that would be interesting. Um, do you remember? I think it was during COVID time. Like people would just go out and buy all the toilet paper
Yeah.
and roll, and then and sell it at a markup, and you're just like, you're a scumbag. Like, come on, like it's a
What?
sanitary product that like everyone needs, and like you're just taking advantage of people. I mean, I think a lot of them got in trouble, and like the government was like, yeah, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Like for something like this.
I'm fine with them people capitalizing on a situation. It's the free market. If more people had it, there would have been more competition, and thusly they wouldn't have been able to sell it for their exorbitant prices. But
Yeah, but
at the time,
toilet paper.
yeah, it's what it is. I mean, okay, this is where people get this wrong is in a hurricane, say something happens to Louisiana again, and they need bottled water. Well, in that type of situation, it's already dangerous to just go there in the first place. So to bring bottled water to people and not sell it at a price that makes it worth your while, even though it's a humanitarian thing and oh my, we should be so good to each other, really it doesn't. It's not humanitarian at all because if you don't allow people to make a profit on it or at least do something for themselves, they won't do it at all. So then nobody gets water in Louisiana because the government tells you to not sell it for even a small markup.
Yeah, yeah, that's the whole another ethical question, right? It's like How do you feel?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I'm talking to my dad. What? You there,
Yeah,
Josh?
yeah. Are we good?
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good. I was just making silence. I'll have to cut that out. But so man, I totally lost my train of thought. Wait, we're just talking about marking up and the
Not,
ethical question.
yeah. Is it an ethical question? And I believe a free market actually creates a better society because even though it capitalizes on people's greed, right? It still drives innovation. It drives societies to create.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I'm all for the free market and competition and things like that. The toilet paper just seems weird to me, I'll be honest. Like that's just I don't know. Because here's the thing too. I do think even though we are a free market, we do need to control big pharma more. That's just
Well,
an
we're really not a free market, and big pharma is an absolute, like, you look into how it's made, they have so many patents, so many monopoly laws, so many this X and Y and Z. They can't be sued because of whatever laws have been passed. They are actually the epitome of a monopoly through like six companies. They're
yeah.
they don't act, they get together, they collaborate, they pick and choose who gets to make the low end and the high end drugs between the companies. So they really are just divided companies that work in tandem. So that's why their costs are so high.
Yeah, and they're not the only company that does that, but they do it at I think the most extreme. There's definitely, a couple companies in America that owns a lot of other companies and and make a lot of these decisions. But my point I was trying to get around with that one though, with it's just it's so expensive for like life-saving medications that really shouldn't be like more than like, they shouldn't be making as much money as they are. They like yeah, like to your point about the toilet paper and bringing or bottle of water, bringing it there. Yeah, let them make some money from it because it is a product, but they don't need to be making like thousands of percentage off their, like
Well, the first person can make whatever percentages they want. The second person will drive the cost down, obviously, because they have to compete. So when you have more people bringing in more innovation or more products, it drives costs down. That's the problem with big pharma is you don't actually have more people coming into the system. They limit access to this, and it's kind of like crony capitalism. It's not actually capitalism. It's an oligarchy of seven companies that decide that nobody can get access to this. So we'll lobby the government to make laws, which becomes that's actually socialism at that point. It's no longer capitalism. It's no longer a free market.
yeah.
When the government steps in and makes laws against things, that is technically socialism. It's not free market.
Yeah, I have a buddy that he has diabetes and he was the type that you're born with and I think it's type 1.
One.
And uh his whole life he's going to have insulin, right? He's going to have to buy insulin. And
Or
it's just
block
crazy to me.
sugar.
Yeah, and it's just crazy to me how much like they pay for it, And I know there is some movement there, hopefully by the government to kind of like restrict how much things can be charged on insulin. But the thing
I,
is, like to your point, there's
no,
only a couple
no.
companies making those decisions.
If there had competition in ways of making insulin or any of these other drugs, it would drive the cost down. That's how competition works. It never drives prices up.
Yeah. So the question is, how do we get to that point? How things are set up now?
Well, take away the government's ways of limiting the market. We're
Oh,
not
taking
like if you look at the free market index of America, we're not even near a free market anymore.
how much pushback do you think there would be to that, though?
About the same as you get with any left wing versus right wing policy.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. I just feel like it's so hard to get stuff done now in government because
But
we're
yeah,
so polarized.
not only that, but bureaucracy just slows things down in the first place when you have to cut through so much red tape to even get a pump installed in your yard. And you got to go get 20 city permits and 10 different licenses and whatever process to put in a sprinkler system. It's nobody does it.
Yeah, man, that is something that like I understand why those policies are in place, but I don't necessarily always really agree with them. Like, if it's your
They,
land, your property, and it's not going to affect anyone, right?
you could simplify it through the market, though. You could say, okay, you have to pay one company one fee, and they do all this X, Y, and Z to double check things, which is like a third party testing for drugs or whatever. They already do this. You have Blue Cross, or not Blue Stake that has to be contacted before you ever dig, right?
Yeah,
So you have these companies already in place, and then you add government bureaucracy on top of it. You could just get rid of the government bureaucracy, make one law that says, hey, follow this one code of ethics, which is what we used to do. If it doesn't hurt your neighbor and it doesn't really, then you can do whatever you want on your land, more or less.
yeah,
It's libertarian for the most part.
yeah. No, I don't understand how. I mean, in my limited time of life here on Earth, how we got to the point where we kind of stopped trusting society and just society as a whole, like the people, to make decisions, right? Like or to kind of govern themselves to a certain point, right? Like we have lots of regulations, and I hear from my parents, oh, back in my day, this or that, right? Like we could do this, and that's why we have these regulations now. And I'm just like, yeah,
It's the
but
safety mentality.
yeah, but like,
You're not responsible for your own safety. The company is.
mm, yeah, well, I don't know if I want to trust someone else with my own safety personally.
Exactly. And that's the thing is they didn't back in the day. Now you have a lot of people who do. It's the government welfare program. It's a safety net. I quit my job. I can still live in this country because I'm paid $700 a month food stamps or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, back when COVID first happened, I could have like gone on to some government program or like unemployment, but I didn't. I got a job. That's what I did. I was like, screw that. Like, I'm gonna, I'm gonna, I'm gonna find a safe job in a safe market, even though stuff's going down. And I know it was hard for people to get jobs at the time, but for me, I was able to get something, and I was able to make things work because I didn't want to rely, and I don't want to ever get to the point where I'm like reliant on the government to take care of me. Like I think it's good to have a form of government, but I don't think they should be as big as they are because at the end of the day, like who's gonna really take care of you when something goes down? It's gonna be if someone's gonna take care of you and help out and like kind of going back to that survival situation.
Your
If
neighbor and your
we're
family.
you're yeah, exactly, your neighbors and your family, and that's who you should have a better relationship with and advocate for, and take care of, not this party that probably doesn't even care about you really at the end of the day, right? Or is trying to buy your vote by bribing you or whatever the case may be, right?
That's why I think that we'll go back to a turn of the century kind of philosophy if World War III ever were to go down. Because without the infrastructure in place, we would be consigned to not have, say, police officers anymore. It wouldn't be a state funded thing. It would be a militia per town per people. And that militia would have the values of that community. So then you would have a self regulating community. You'd have laws in place that are actually to that community 100% percent specific to that region.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Oh, it really should be again. I mean, we should set up militias rather than having police officers. Each town funds their own. Period.
Yeah, no, I agree. um Kind of, I'm gonna ask a question, kind of pulling us back into the music portion of this because we kind of went on a talent, which is
Standing.
fine. I mean, we're just having a conversation, but okay. So, in your opinion, and you could even relate it to kind of what we're talking about, but what do you think the greatest genre of music is from a personal perspective, not from like society's perspective, but from your own perspective?
Classical. like
classical music.
Beethoven, Bach, all those guys like that turns or the Renaissance to Baroque era ish. They were
Yes,
so incredibly influential on all music throughout the rest of history. That's even if you take heavy metal guitar, they're shredding classical scales.
yeah, it's true. The great composers. I mean, that's why we call them the great composers, right? They have infected or affected music for forever, probably. You know, like
And
I think hundreds of years from now, people are still going to be studying it, you know, and stuff, and they're not going to look back at probably like modern day right now and be like, yeah, that they're so influential. And probably not.
even if you look at all music throughout history, it goes in kind of these ebbs and flows, right? You have pop culture goes really, really complex in music theory and then drops down to like no complexity at all and goes right back up to really complex and then no complexity at all. We've had this happen since the like 30s to 40s to 50s to 60s. Even in the 70s, 70s was like a really peak for complex music. If you go back and look at what was composed back then and all their scales and how they relate to each other, they were massively good composers for music. Even in rock, you
Oh yeah,
have, like Heard It Through the Grapevine. Not that one. What is it? House of the Rising Sun. House of the Rising Sun goes into like it's a major chord to a minor chord to a major chord to a diminished chord or something like that. We don't use that in our music today. We hardly ever even touch a diminished chord unless you're listening to jazz.
yeah, yeah. Pop music doesn't use it very often. They, I mean, most pop music uses
It's
you know
two,
about
two
three
chords, right?
chords, yeah, and then they'll do a variation of them. Sometimes 3 to 4
Even the
chords,
beat
you know.
is almost exactly the same.
Yeah, it's interesting how much we've changed, and I will say this: there is some pop music that I do like, and even though it's simple, you know, I
Well,
like it.
simple isn't always bad. It can be
Yeah,
quite
yeah,
fun.
yeah, but it is less complex, right? There's less music theory involved. There's less, I guess, in for me, like intriguing places, um, and the complexity is just not, you know, it makes it easier for people to play, which is a pro and a con because you get more people in the music that maybe would have not been able to get into it because, you know, it seemed overwhelming by how complex, you know, it would have been. So I guess that is a pro. Um, but you know, I feel like every um, I guess period in time of music, they have a lot of pros and cons, right? Like there's some really good composers, there's some really good performers, there's some really good players, and then there's the very like mediocre ones. Some of them sometimes become really popular. That was the same, you know, even in the classical period, there were some kind of mediocre composers, but they, you know, they had some pretty good fame, right? But then the ones that lasted throughout time, you know, like Beethoven, you know, he was a real composer. You know, not to say the other ones weren't real composers, they just weren't maybe like legendary composers, if you will, a different level, you know.
They weren't a time immemorial.
Yes, and for whatever reason, you know, like some some artists, they just get remembered for whatever reason. They spoke to society more during that time, and their legacy was, you know, moved forward. But like when like during our times, like it would be interesting to like look back, I don't know, 50 years. Not, I mean, we don't even need that long into modern day society where things change so quickly. Let's say just 10 years down the road, we look back at like what artists were popular and now which ones are in the next 10 years. So even during our lifetime, it'll be interesting to see like what artists are still around, which ones are one hit wonders, like what celebrities are even still around, you know, because I know in Hollywood, they just like, oh, you're relevant. Okay, now you're not relevant, like super quick. Like it happens in a matter of a couple of years, and then you're just like you're gone, and the next person's in.
So I would say we're actually in the middle of one of those shifts right now, literally. You have the pop culture of, say, Britney Spears from 20 years ago to what is currently becoming more so the pop culture now. Uh, just bringing the banjo back into it, right? A lot of bands since about 5 to 6 years ago have started to incorporate more acoustic music, and the banjo bringing itself into fame again. Mumford and Sons, we have there's there's a ton of bands that have become famous that feature a banjo. And it's because people crave something different. They've got exposed to this Britney Spears millennial whoop, exactly the same time signature through hundreds of thousands of songs that have been created in the last 20 years, all featuring this exact same sequence of notes, sequence of timing, sequence of beats, where the beat drops. It's monotonous. And this next generation, say your generation and Generation Z or whatever it is, are disregarding it and going back to real traditional music, like folk music and things.
Yeah, it is interesting because I do agree. I think there is a shift. We've had kind of primarily at the top of the charts for a long time, kind of this hip hop and rap um, mixed in with pop kind of genre. I don't know exactly what I call it. I would say it's more kind of like a hip hop genre, but it's definitely probably a sub genre. And a lot of the groups I think I've seen, at least locally here, we kind of have like this indie rock and alternative rock type of music coming back as well, but then also more of those like acoustic styled artists as well, where you have more traditional, stringed instruments coming in, even if it's just for like the bridge or whatever, or if it's just like to add some flavor and some taste to the composition or the song. I've noticed that there is a shift, which is interesting because I think a good case study for this is think of Post Malone, right? Primarily a hip hop artist and pop artist and rapper, and now he is doing a country album, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that it's a good case study for
Didn't Rihanna
um
also do one or something?
yeah, and then there's other artists doing stuff with them, and then I saw a band that I really like is a '90s rock band is um Papa Roach, and the lead singer, he's been doing some kind of like more like traditional, almost country-ish kind of sounding songs with like other artists, like country artists, on versions of his song, which is super cool. And I'm like, wow, I would have never kind of thought Papa Roach would be doing something like that, you know? And then I know Post Malone always wanted to be a country artist, so
Really?
it's not super surprising that he's doing country now.
Yeah,
When he was
one is
younger,
he moved to Utah.
yeah, no, which is cool. I mean, since this podcast is local right now in Utah with Utah locals, we can take some pride in that. Um, but yeah, it is surprising though because his he became very popular with his style of music, and then he just took the shift. And you know, sometimes when artists do that, it just like it doesn't work out for them. It's just. But I guess if you get as big as he is, and then just is performing and writing songs with these, pretty notable country artists, it seems authentic, and it feels authentic because like that's really what he wanted to do back in the day was country. So I don't know if you listened to any of his songs since his country album that he's released, but it's actually really good.
I'll have to look into that because I haven't listened to the radio or anything pop in a long, or I would say relevant in culture for a long time.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'm not always in kind of the main pop scene or, just kind of mainstream media for music. I mean, I try to keep up on knowing things, but yeah, I've listened to a couple of his country songs and I really like them. And I grew up on country when I was younger. My parents both listened to it when we lived out on the farm, lived out in Tremont and in Utah for a while as well. Like my dad would listen to country, but he'd also listen to like AC/DC and like more rock and roll when he was working out. And then my mom just always loved country and like also like John Denver and kind of that type of music. And so I was growing up on it, right? Like, so I do have appreciation for country. I wouldn't say I listen to it a ton personally. I kind of like identify more with like that 90s rock scene and like grunge. I also really like the 80s. I mean, I was 80s cover band for a long time, so I love that type of music too. Uh, but I also like the early 2000s where you had bands like Five Seconds of Summer, Fall Out Boy, groups like that. So I don't know. I have a wide range. I also love jazz, I love classical music, but I would say 90s rock all the way. But yeah, all right. Well, let's move on to the next question. And what is your favorite band that you have ever seen live? Makes you think a little bit
Live
more.
show would be the Dead South, but
Dead South.
yep, that would be the favorite band that I've ever seen live.
Okay. And why were they your favorite live?
Well, they're one of my favorites to listen to in the first place, just because they're really good bluegrass, even though they
Yeah.
come from Canada. But the live showing, they're perfectly represented by their actual album. They sing their songs as they are. They're they don't jumble their songs. Their sound is exactly on point because they're acoustic music. So it really, even in a venue, it's all the same as long as you have the proper sound gear to pick it up.
Yeah.
And, and they're just a good band to watch. I mean, their music videos are exactly what they do on stage. Nothing. It's like they just kind of snap their fingers and tap their foot.
Yeah, that's cool. That's
Somehow it works.
awesome.
And they dress the part and they I guess talk the talk and walk the walk on that one. So
Fair enough. So what you would recommend others to see them live?
oh yeah. If you can afford it anymore, they're expensive now. I got
Mm,
to see them when they first came to Utah on their very first tour of America.
yeah.
So my ticket was like $30 or something like that. Now I think they're 150 for nosebleed seats.
Yeah, that's another thing. And even since when I was like a teenager, tickets for shows are so much more expensive than they used to be. And I mean, which is good and bad. Part of the reason for that is when I was still younger, CDs were still kind of relevant, and now CDs aren't. It's all about streaming, and you artists used to be able to sell CDs and make a lot more money that way, right? Not anymore. Streaming, you hardly get paid, anything for a stream, right?
I think they get paid 0.001 of a cent per song streamed.
Something like that. Yeah, it's pretty bad. I think for every about depending on what platform you're on, for every 1,000 streams you get, it's like between like $4 and $6.
That would be the 0.00.
Yeah. So yeah, not great. So I mean, it makes sense why they have to charge more for their live tickets because they still have to make a living and they have to be profitable in what they're doing. So that's kind of how musicians had to shift. They had to tour more to make money instead of just selling CDs, which is understandable.
Well, that kind of just goes back to my philosophy of us returning to a 1900s-esque era, because that's how it would have happened back then. Musicians would have had to tour. There wasn't records.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, everything's shifting for
It
better or
feels
for
like
worse.
everything's going back. Not necessarily better or worse, just resetting to a more fundamental of society.
Yeah, yeah, that's one way of looking at it for sure. I'm just kind of observing what's happening and still making up like my mind on exactly how everything's going and what it seems the way we're going, you know. But for me, at the end of the day, I'm gonna just keep doing my own thing. I'm gonna keep just working on music and being involved in the industry and doing stuff like this where we just chat about it and which I think is valuable because this is something we've also pushed away from. We used to talk to your neighbor. How many people talk to their neighbor anymore?
Well, I live in the country, so we actually do know one neighbor. We don't know the other neighbor, but they just moved
Yeah.
in.
Well, yeah, but like in small towns, you get to know your neighbors, but the bigger the city gets, the less people even really talk to their neighbors unless they go to church together or something. If you're not in the same political spectrum of them, the same religion, or like your kids play together, if you're not any of those, you probably won't talk to your neighbors anymore, you know? And I don't know. I don't think that's good. I think you should have a relationship with those around you, even if you disagree on a lot of things. I think it's good to have a relationship with those around you. It doesn't matter if it's at work, at school, in college, and at home. Like you should have a relationship with those around you so you know them. If in the case something does happen, you know the people you can rely on, the people you could knock on their door and be like, "Hey, we're a little short on sugar. Do you have any sugar?" You know, it's something small like that, or borrowing like maybe a lot more, or yours broke that day. You know, what neighbors would be cool with that, or a bigger situation where someone's trying to break into your house and you're super far away and your kid's in the house and you can call a neighbor and be like, "Hey, something's going on," you know, and the police aren't able to get there in time or something, you know, something like that. Even the people that you can rely on, or like the house, you could tell them, "Hey, sneak out the back and run to this neighbor's house," you know, to your kids. I don't know, you know, I'm just giving you examples. It's to
Well,
know
no,
your
I've seen this exact situation in my own. Our neighbor literally came over freaking out because she couldn't find her daughter. And immediately, everybody within all of our neighbors, the whole entire neighborhood, spread out and started looking for this lady's daughter. Questions asked is do it.
yeah. I mean, because society and a community used to come together. Not like now we pull out our phone and someone's getting beaten on the street and just like video it. It's like what? What kind of society is that? Like, well, we're gonna get a lot of likes and shares on this one. It's like, yeah, you're just literally watching someone probably innocent, hopefully innocent, depending on the situation, getting just beat, and you're just
Well,
watching them.
that comes from this disjointery of our society, where they have destroyed communities, and cities are especially bad for this because, like you said, you don't know your neighbor, and it kind of breeds distrust. When you have to lock all your windows and doors and put bars on everything to feel safe, you're literally in a prison and you don't trust anything around you.
Yeah,
And then you don't help anybody around you.
yeah, it's so backwards. Like some people talk about like how tribalism's bad, and I mean, I think there are sometimes it could be, but I think overall it's more about like just bringing a community together and everyone agreeing. It's like a small form of government almost, like where everyone has an
Everybody agrees
expectation.
on a small set of values or a source
E-
set of values. It doesn't matter what skin color as long as you integrate into the tribe.
Exactly, exactly, and that's why like I feel like people that are like at least back in the day, or some people I've met, they're a little bit more on like the hippier side. They're just like very like kind of community built and drawn, like the people that go to concerts together, the people that will go hiking together and climbing together, the people that will play in bands together. They're really tight knit, right? So they got their back. And like there's lots of stories of like bands, get like someone fighting someone in the band, and then they all jump in and protect that guy, or whatever, or girl, or whether it's in a bar setting and maybe the drummer did deserve to get punched in the face, but then they back him up, or it's it's kind of more of that kind of like brotherhood, that I think is a good thing. And it's interesting how sometimes it gets demonized to have like a brotherhood, and it's like, well, I don't know, like it works in a lot of ways because there's a lot of football players that say their coaches were like very influential in their life, and you look out for your other teammates, right? So like in a team setting, I feel like those are good values. Those are kind of only where you see them nowadays, like those type of values. Like tribalism is like, okay, you got the football team, you got a basketball team, you got soccer, you got these teams like in sports that play together that look out for each other. And other than that, I even occasionally see it in politics, but that's where you see it the most.
I was going to say, you see it quite a bit in politics. Every time you're introduced by somebody who wants to know your pronouns, that's a tribalistic signal to let them know that you're not one of them if you refuse to play their game.
Yeah, I guess you know, both parties they have things that are
And
tribalistic,
it's
right?
exactly
Like,
both sides.
yeah. So Yeah, I guess that's a good point. But all right, let's see what else I got.
No, no, so let's get back to the questions.
No,
We
no,
can.
you're good. I also know you got to get going here soon, so we'll
Yeah.
wrap it up here soon. So my next question for you is, if you were to play in a band that would perform regularly, what type of band would you want it to be, and why?
Well, a folk slash bluegrass kind of band. It's my banjo just kind of fits in that scene. I wouldn't mind trying it out in other genres, but I feel it just doesn't quite fit in a lot of other genres. You can play country music. It's pretty prevalent in that, but heavy metal is a little bit off with the banjo. I've heard a couple of remixes of heavy metal songs. They sound cool, but they just don't quite mesh. Uh,
Yeah, probably not.
it's just that's kind of how I roll. Just follow what I actually already know.
Okay. No, I kind of figured you were gonna say that, so which is not a bad thing. Just means you're true to your art form, and what you enjoy listening to and what you kind of identify with a little bit more.
And heavy metal bass when it's being played as fast as the banjo really overpowers the banjo. Even and
Yeah,
that's
that's a good point. That's kind of funny. Well, Zach, it's been a pleasure. Just kind of shooting the shit and talking things about music and other things like life and tribalism. um,
it's in everything anymore.
yeah, no, it's true. I just like I said, I like these to be more conversations and not too like interview style. Like later down the road, I might have more kind of interview style segments or episodes, depending on who I'm meeting with. But for the most part, it's just more interesting to like have a conversation with people and agree or disagree on some things and just um, I don't know, just have a conversation.
It was good
So
talking to you.